The chapel at Arlington National Cemetery overflowed with uniforms and ceremony. Rows of officers in immaculate dress blues filled every pew, their ribbons glinting under the stained-glass light. The air carried the solemn hum of tradition, crisp, silent, disciplined. Major General Robert Caldwell was being laid to rest with full military honors, and half of Washington's command structure had shown up to say farewell. Outside, Master Sergeant Derek Thompson stood at his assigned post near the chapel entrance, posture sharp, eyes scanning. He'd done this duty more times than he could count: funerals, promotions, memorials. The rhythm never changed: verify credentials, match names to the guest list, direct the flow. Efficient. Predictable. Mechanical. Then he saw her. An older woman was making her way up the stone path, slow but steady, clutching a single folded paper in both hands. Her black dress looked like it belonged to another decade, and the thin cloth coat she wore hung loosely against the soft Virginia breeze. Scuffed shoes. No handbag. Silver streaks in her hair, tied back in a no-nonsense bun. She looked like someone who didn't belong amid the brass and medals. Thompson straightened as she approached the checkpoint. "Ma'am," he said, polite but firm, "this is a restricted service. May I see your invitation and military ID?" The woman looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, not tired, exactly, but ancient in their knowing. "I need to be inside," she said softly. Her voice barely rose above the wind, yet carried a quiet authority. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Thompson replied. "Without proper credentials, I can't allow you entry. The ceremony is limited to service members and invited guests." She didn't argue. She simply extended the folded paper toward him. "I knew General Caldwell," she said. "A long time ago." Thompson hesitated but didn't take the paper. He'd heard that before, civilians who meant well but didn't understand military protocol. "I'm sure you did, ma'am. But rules are rules. If your name isn't on the list, you'll have to attend tomorrow's public memorial instead." Behind him, Lieutenant Commander James Morrison noticed the holdup and stepped forward, irritation already coloring his face. "Sergeant, is there a problem here?" "No, sir," Thompson answered. "Just explaining procedure." Morrison's sharp eyes flicked to the woman, and his voice cut like a blade. "Ma'am, you need to vacate this area immediately. This is an official military installation. Unauthorized presence is prohibited." The woman didn't move. Her voice came low but steady. "I served," she said. "I have a right to be here." Morrison gave a short, humorless laugh. "You served? In what capacity? Kitchen? Clerical support?" His tone carried open disdain. "This funeral honors those who saw combat, officers who earned their place in history. Not auxiliary staff looking to share in reflected glory." A nearby corporal looked uncomfortable, but stayed silent. Thompson kept his face impassive, though a flicker of something, doubt, maybe, passed through his eyes. The woman's grip on the paper tightened. "Please," she said quietly. "Just check my designation." Morrison sighed, exasperated. "Designation? You mean your employee number?" He turned to Thompson. "Sergeant, call base security. Have her removed. If she resists, charge her with trespassing." Thompson's hand went to his radio, then stopped. Something in the woman's calm, unflinching stance held him there. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't defiant. She simply was. "What's your name, ma'am?" Thompson asked softly. "Elise Thornton." Morrison pulled out his tablet and scrolled through the digital guest roster. Thornton, his smirk returned. No Elise Thornton on the list. No Thornton at all, actually. There you have it. Unauthorized. "Sergeant," he snapped, "that's an order. Before Thompson could respond, a gravelly voice from behind cut through the tension. "Hold up." All heads turned. Command Sergeant Major Victor Hayes was approaching, cane in hand but stride steady. A legend in his own right, old-school Army, 3 tours in Vietnam, and a chest full of ribbons that could have told a lifetime of stories. The younger officers stepped aside instinctively. "Ma'am," Hayes said, addressing her directly. "Did I hear you say your name's Elise Thornton?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." Something in Hayes's expression shifted, not recognition, but a shadow of it, like the faint echo of a long-forgotten melody. "What unit did you serve with?" "Sergeant Major," Morrison interrupted impatiently. "This woman." "I wasn't talking to you, Commander," Hayes said, eyes never leaving the woman. "Answer the question, ma'am." Thornton straightened, her frail posture suddenly dignified. "I can't tell you my unit," she said quietly. "You know how it works?" Hayes's eyes narrowed. Slowly, he nodded. "Then give me your designation." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Thompson watched, Morrison frowned in confusion, and the soldiers nearby leaned in, sensing the air change. Elise Thornton lifted her chin. Her voice, when it came, was calm and grave. "Night Angel." The name fell into the space between them like a thunderclap no one could hear, and everything stopped. Hayes froze. His weathered face drained of color. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Dear God," he whispered. Morrison blinked. "What? What's that supposed to mean?" But Hayes was already turning, already moving toward the chapel doors, faster than anyone thought a man his age could move. "Don't let her leave," he barked. "Keep her right there." Morrison stared after him, baffled. "What the hell is going on?" Thompson didn't answer. He had already pulled out his phone, typing the name Night Angel into the military database. Command Sergeant Major Victor Hayes moved through the crowded chapel like a storm in slow motion. He brushed past junior officers and aides without apology, his cane clicking sharply against the marble floor. Every step carried urgency. When a few captains tried to stop him, one look at his face was enough, they stepped aside. At the front of the sanctuary, under a vaulted ceiling awash in colored light, a chaplain spoke about duty, honor, and sacrifice. The eulogy was steady, solemn, until Hayes reached the first row and leaned toward a man wearing 4 stars on his shoulders. "General Holloway," he whispered. "Night Angel." The reaction was instant. General Marcus Holloway, commander of United States Special Operations Command, a man known for his composure even in combat briefings, stiffened as if struck. His eyes snapped to Hayes, disbelief flashing for only a heartbeat before it hardened into certainty. Without another word, the 4-star general rose to his feet. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. The chaplain faltered mid-sentence as Holloway turned and strode straight up the center aisle, ignoring the hundreds of eyes following him. When a general of his rank stands during another general's funeral, no one knows what to do, so they simply watched. Outside, Lieutenant Commander Morrison was still lecturing Thompson about security procedures when the heavy wooden doors burst open. Morning light spilled across the polished floor, and Holloway appeared, his presence changing the air around him. Conversations died in an instant. He scanned the scene with practiced precision until his gaze locked on the woman standing quietly beside the checkpoint. "General Holloway, sir." Morrison snapped to attention. "We have a situation with an unauthorized." "Quiet," Holloway said without looking at him. The single word landed with the force of command. Morrison's mouth clicked shut. The general walked straight to Elise Thornton and stopped 3 feet away. For a long moment, he simply studied her face. Decades seemed to fold between them, years of secrets neither could speak aloud. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw by something deeper than protocol. "Captain Thornton," he said. "It's been a long time." Morrison blinked. Captain?" The word hit like a grenade. Every soldier within earshot froze. "Yes, sir," Elise answered quietly. "It has." Holloway nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "How long since your last operation?" 43 years, she said. 46 since Night Angel was my designation." The general exhaled, his posture shifting from formality to reverence. "You served with Caldwell?" "I did," she said. "Back when he was still a lieutenant, before all this." Her eyes swept over the rows of medals, the ceremonial flags, the grandeur that death sometimes bestows on the living. "Before the world learned his name." By now, officers were emerging from the chapel, drawn by the disruption. A rear admiral, 2 major generals, several colonels, they formed a loose semicircle, watching in puzzled silence. Morrison finally found his voice. "Sir, she had no credentials, no ID. She wasn't on the list. I was following." "Commander Morrison," Holloway interrupted softly, "do you know what Night Angel means?" Morrison hesitated. "No, sir." "Then let me educate you." The general turned, his voice carrying through the quiet crowd. In 1977, the U.S. military initiated a black operations program so classified that it officially never existed. The mission was simple in description, impossible in practice: send operatives into places where no American soldier could be acknowledged. No backup. No extraction. No recognition if captured or killed. He paused, letting the weight of the word settle. We needed agents who could move unseen. Because our enemies were watching for men in uniform, we turned to the one group they would never suspect. The officers leaned closer. Even the wind seemed to still. "We recruited women," Holloway continued. "Black women. 12 of them. Former Army Intelligence, Signal Corps, a few from Air Force Special Operations. We erased their files, changed their names, trained them harder than anyone before or since. They learned infiltration, languages, espionage, skills that wouldn't reach our Special Forces pipeline for another 20 years. He looked toward Elise. They went into East Berlin, Beirut, Cambodia, missions that would have started wars if exposed. Of those 12, only 3 survived. Captain Elise Thornton was one of them. The crowd shifted, the realization sinking in. Thompson felt his throat tighten. Morrison's face had gone pale. Her codename, Holloway said, was Night Angel. She earned it during a rescue operation in Cambodia, carried 2 wounded Rangers 15 miles through enemy territory, under fire the entire time, and talked her way through 3 checkpoints using 5 different cover identities. That was one of 17 missions she completed in 7 years. The general's tone softened. She was captured twice. Tortured. Never broke. Every time she came home, she disappeared again, because she was never supposed to exist. The silence was total. Even the flags outside seemed to hang motionless. Holloway turned to Morrison, voice low but edged with steel. "And you told her she was kitchen staff?" Morrison swallowed hard. "Sir, I didn't know." "No," Holloway said. "You didn't. Because she and her team did their jobs too well. They vanished for our security, and we let the world forget them." He looked back at Elise. "General Caldwell knew. He served as your intel liaison during the Tiran mission, 1979. You saved his life, twice." Elise nodded faintly. "He was a good man. Even then." The chapel fell into a reverent hush as Sergeant Thompson guided Captain Elise Thornton up the center aisle. Every officer, every enlisted soldier who had served long enough to recognize significance when it stood before them, rose instinctively. No command was given, it simply happened. Medals glinted like starlight as rows of high-ranking officials straightened, hats pressed against their hearts. The old wooden pews creaked softly under the weight of the moment. No one was entirely sure who she was, only that General Holloway had called her captain, and that was enough. That single word carried the weight of decades buried in classified files. Elise walked slowly, leaning just slightly on Thompson's arm. She kept her eyes forward, toward the flag-draped coffin at the front of the chapel. General Caldwell's coffin. The man who had once been a young lieutenant beside her in a world that pretended she didn't exist. Holloway followed behind, his hands clasped at the small of his back, his expression unreadable. To the watching officers, it looked as though he was escorting royalty. When they reached the front row, Holloway gestured to the empty seat beside the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "Right here, Captain." Elise hesitated. "Sir, this place is reserved." "It's reserved for you," he said simply. She lowered herself into the seat with quiet dignity. Around her, generals and admirals nodded faintly in acknowledgement. A few looked away, blinking against the sudden sting in their eyes. The chaplain, recovering his composure, cleared his throat and returned to the pulpit. His voice trembled slightly as he resumed his eulogy. "General Caldwell understood that true service often goes unseen," he said. "That the most courageous acts are the ones that will never be recognized publicly. That honor is not found in medals or ceremonies, but in sacrifice made when no one is watching." The words struck differently now. They were no longer just a sermon, they were truth walking, breathing, sitting quietly in the front row. From the back of the chapel, Morrison remained standing near the entrance, shoulders stiff. Holloway turned to him and beckoned him closer. The lieutenant commander hesitated, then approached, face pale but eyes fixed straight ahead. "Commander," Holloway said, his voice low enough for only those near him to hear, "you owe this woman an apology." Morrison's throat bobbed. "Yes, sir. Not just words. Understanding." Holloway's tone sharpened. "You'll write a formal letter to Captain Thornton. Then you'll prepare a 10-page report on the history of women in classified operations, particularly those from the 1970s black programs. You'll submit it to me personally within 2 weeks." "Yes, sir," Morrison managed. His voice was barely audible. "If I find your grasp of military history lacking," Holloway added, "we'll discuss your continued suitability for command." Morrison swallowed hard. "Crystal clear, sir." Holloway leaned closer, his voice soft but heavy. "And remember this, Commander, the fiercest warriors we've ever produced were not always the ones wearing medals. The real heroes were the ones no one ever saw coming." He turned back to face the altar. As the chaplain spoke, an uneasy stillness settled over the room. It wasn't the rehearsed silence of ceremony, it was respect born of revelation. Faces that had seen war, death, and command now watched a frail elderly woman and wondered how many untold stories like hers had faded into the dark corners of history. When the service ended, the honor guard began its solemn movement. The folded flags, the slow cadence of boots, the echo of tradition that has outlived generations. Elise stood with them, her back straight, her age momentarily erased by the posture of memory. Outside, the November wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint echoes of taps across the marble stones. The procession moved toward the burial site, a sea of uniforms following the casket draped in stars and stripes. General Holloway walked beside Elise in silence for several moments. Then he asked quietly, "What have you been doing all these years, Captain?" She gave a small, almost self-conscious smile. "Living small. Taught high school history for a while. Retired about 10 years ago. Just, ordinary life." "Ordinary?" Holloway's voice was gentle but firm. "You gave your youth to missions that couldn't be acknowledged, then gave your later years to teaching kids who'll never know who their teacher truly was. That's not ordinary, Captain. That's legacy." She didn't answer, but the corners of her mouth curved in a ghost of a smile. When they reached the gravesite, the soldiers took their places. The sky above Arlington was bright and mercilessly clear, the kind of blue that made the rows of white headstones shine like ivory. As the rifle squad raised their weapons, the world seemed to hold its breath. 3 volleys cracked through the morning air. Then silence. The bugler began to play taps, the mournful notes rising and falling like a last heartbeat. Elise stood motionless beside the casket, hands clasped in front of her. The years showed in her posture, but not in her eyes. They were steady, unbroken, the eyes of someone who had already stood in darker places than this. When the final note faded, an officer approached with the folded flag. He paused before Caldwell's widow, then hesitated. His gaze shifted to Holloway, who gave a single nod. The officer turned toward Elise Thornton. "On behalf of a grateful nation," he said softly, "and in recognition of service that transcends the official record, please accept this flag, in honor of your sacrifice alongside General Caldwell." The air trembled with emotion. Elisa's hands shook as she accepted the folded triangle of fabric. For the first time that day, her composure wavered.